don't do the right research, and they just put all these headlines out. And so James Dyson gets a tough time in the UK. But at the same time, what he does, in my view, for just inspiring young people to get into engineering, and his company itself, it's one of the most successful companies in the UK. And, he's got like this massive campus here, where it feels like a little, it's the middle of nowhere in Malmesbury, but it's a little like, one of those Silicon Valley campuses,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's got this university, right? He's got these students there, and, half of them are women, right? And when they don't do physics, right? When some women, because the schools are really crap at teaching physics, right? Basically, they give him a summer course, and they don't have to do physics, and they teach them, and they become really good, right? So they make up for these issues that the education system has around physics and engineering, and that school, that engineering school at Dyson Institute, is called the Dyson Institute. If anybody wants to look it up, you're in the UK. That there are kids there now. Last year's intake, my daughter was telling me that probably about 25% of them had, like her, had places in the top universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, and decided to do this instead, right? They get 21,000 pay. They get 4 years. They get the degree, full degree, accredited right now by the University, Warwick University, and the professors come on site, and they get to work on real projects for 3 days a week. I mean, like, why would you not do that, right? I mean, it's very interesting.
Yeah, Cal, he's I've followed him for a while. He feels like a little bit of, the UK's Elon Musk in terms of engineering mind and activity, minus the Twitter fingers, obviously. And he gets a lot of slack. He gets a lot of slack. But so I became a fan after I heard him speak at you guys know about the podcast with Guy Raz, How I Built This. I think it was like a 45-minute episode, and it just blew my mind how he looks at engineering in general, and that was pretty cool.
Very cool. So welcome back, everybody. We'll jump right into it because we're at the top of the hour, and been trying to start 5 minutes early so we can banter and then get started at the top of the hour, because just to make it more synchronized for our European, our Swedish and Swiss friends and German friends like things to start on time. If you spend much time in Switzerland or Sweden or Germany, you understand what I mean. So let's, out of respect for them, on the American time zone, the other time zone, we can start 20 minutes late if need be. You can see the two different time zones that I'm referring to by clicking on the title of this room, where you can see where we meet now, twice each weekday and sometimes on the weekends. But welcome back. And there's a fantastic bunch of really interesting headlines. There's now a new phenomenon where people DM me, not only during the show, but all throughout the day, knowing that there's another episode just, hours away. So,
Tyler,
Akil,
you need some AI. You need
yes,
some AI.
yeah, yes, indeed. So we need a new system for people submitting headlines and voting them up, and that could be very cool. Where everyone
morning, Tyler.
Good morning
Cal.
to me. Hey, Monica, Michelle, Jay, Tomoko, Johan, Hassan,
Maybe
Pierre,
a
everybody.
Google
Yep.
form.
Yeah.
Maybe something as simple as a Google form.
Yeah, Google form could be something really easy. Well, most people are sending them from Twitter, I think, because they are discovering the headlines on Twitter a lot of times. So maybe.
Well, why don't they just tweet them? Why don't we keep it simple? Because complexity starts to make us a big company, right?
Yeah.
What I love about this is
Yep.
why don't they just tweet it off or link it to somehow to the Twitter account, right? The tech news around the world. And so there's a whole feed there.
Yeah.
And then you can just pick and choose based on the themes, right? Because you're going to theme it. You're the curator, if you like, right? And so, and then people can just keep using that. I mean, let's make that the single place. Maybe.
Well, you know what we did? You know what we did in Sweden was we created the hashtag at Stockholm Tech, and then I made a Twitter account called at Stockholm Tech, and the at Stockholm Tech Twitter account was an automated bot that would automatically retweet anybody who used the hashtag. So what people could do is they could find an article and then do a what do they call it? Commenting on the article or
I think it's called a quoted tweet or something.
quoted retweet, and then you say this would be great for tech news around the world, and that way it helps drive adoption of what we do
Yeah, let's
here.
do something like that.
Right.
I get it. Eventually, Amy, I think we'll have like these forums and stuff. But
yeah,
what I love about this
Cal, I
platform
love your
is that,
thought as well.
yeah, no, what I love about this platform is simplicity, right?
yeah.
We all jump on. Sometimes I'm driving my kid to school. Sometimes I'm at my desk. Other people are like that, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, it's just simple and the topics are there. But I see what you're saying about DMs. Somebody's decided to send me DMs that tells me the 6 topics we should cover every day, Tyler. If you ever wanted that,
Yeah.
So that, yeah, people have views. It's good.
So let's try that. I want to encourage folks between programs or even during the program, rather than DMing, we would all benefit more if, because I will see it if you include the tech news. Not only will I, but I gotta add Cal and Cheryl and the other mods onto the Tech News Around the World Twitter account so that we can all see when people do this. If you find a good article on Twitter, do a quoted retweet and say, hey, at Tech News Around the World, which is TNATW, this would be great for the next, show. And then all of us will see it instantly. We'll see it in our feeds, and because we'll all have access to that Twitter account. And that way, all of your followers as well see it, which I think would be help. If you really feel it's a good article, then it also helps.
And we can comment on it too, right?
Yeah.
The things
exactly.
we can't cover on here, we will write stuff underneath it. Like
Right.
Points of view. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we can start we can have it gives us the chance to comment back, which we're not so easy to do elsewhere. So yeah, let's try that for now, and it will eventually evolve it and adapt it and improve it, of course, optimize it. So, yeah.
Hey Tyler, it's
yes.
Jen. I was going to say, also remind people to come up and speak out on these things, because to Cal's point, like when we're all driving or doing other things, but I think some people feel a little bit maybe over, kind of over spoken or over whatever, and they don't. So that's why they're tweeting them to you, is to make sure that you go, look, hey, it's relevant, bring it up. Maybe if it's encourage people.
Yeah.
Jennifer, big point, right? So here's some people I got to say, I'm so proud of this. Like, I just love being here because there's some really, really smart people, and in the audience, as well as people who decide to come up, right, Jennifer? And to your point, I get amazing like articles, and Tyler gets like 10 times more than me, but I get the odd one from people that it's just on point, on right. Then I kind of say, like, just come up, just come up. And sometimes what happens is they listen for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then they come up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really
I get a lot of back channel on that too, Cal. Exactly. I get a lot of, not a lot actually, like very little, but just a bit. But it's like, I didn't know if it would be relevant or whatever. And I'm guessing that people, same thing, are like, well, if I send it to Tyler, he can choose and validate that. Yeah, to your point. So just inviting people.
Yep.
I love it how you are totally setting yourselves up to be just doing this 24/7 around the clock.
Right?
Yep. Before you know it, it'll be tech news around the world around the clock. Yeah.
Mafalda, I think you've just signed up, Mafalda. You've signed up. You're on stage.
Thank you for volunteering. Yes.
Cal and Tyler bots. These are guys that never sleep.
If we're talking about tech news, then we need to talk about how the colonial pipeline has been shut down.
Yes. We've been talking about that for the past 3 days. Yeah.
For 5 days.
Yeah. We started talking about it as soon as the first headline happened. Yeah.
And so is it a like where did the like how did that system get compromised? Did it get compromised on?
Do you have an angle? Kevin, share your angle. That's how it works.
We need to welcome Kevin to the show. Kevin, it sounds like this might be your first day here.
Yeah, it is my first day here.
Yeah, we've been talking. We talk about everyone on stage comes here every day, twice a day, for hours every day, and and we've been talking about that. We've probably got 6 hours of combined talk time on that issue since it started.
Okay, so it's the crux of like what I work on. It's the integration of IT and OT.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where DarkSide hit, was in between IT and OT.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So here's the latest. Krebs on Security, which is a in-depth security news and investigation reporter. Have you seen his article that just came out a few hours ago?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the latest. It's an ongoing development, as we've said from the beginning.
What does it say? Go. What does it say?
It says the FBI confirmed this week that a relatively new ransomware group known as DarkSide is responsible for an attack that caused a global pipeline to shut down 5,550 miles of pipe, stranding countless.
We have known that for 4 days that DarkSide is in charge of that.
Yeah, we've been repeating. Kevin, you're not familiar with the rules of engagement here. I'm going to mute you. We've been covering that for 4 days, what I just read. Yeah. So hold on to your pants for a second there, Kevo. So what I just read, we've repeated. We've been saying that for 4 days as well. So I encourage you to hang out here and follow us for the next 4 days and understand the flow of how this works. What Krebs, I'm going to scan through the article to see what Krebs is able to dig up in terms of new information. If you've pre-read the article and you've got the hot sauce on what he's adding to it's quite a long article, actually. Holy smokes, this is a long article. Yeah, his first paragraph is just a simple regurgitation of what we've known since the beginning, essentially. Except for the very first day. It wasn't known until the second day that it was this entity calling themselves DarkSide. And it's still not yet fully confirmed precisely where they are located. There's a lot of speculation that it's a mix of Eastern European and Russian. There's even speculation that the Kremlin is aware of it and is sort of turning a blind eye as it is. But this Krebs on Security article that I'm going to tweet from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account is a very lengthy read for folks who really want to get into Krebs's personal deep dive, as he calls it, a deep dive on the dark side, a closer look at the DarkSide ransomware gang. That's now live, and you can follow along.
What I'm talking about.
Yeah. So this, some of the first quotes that I'm getting to into this article say, he starts off by he's essentially compiling all of the articles that have been posted so far, where their own, what we covered yesterday, the new update yesterday was their own internal statement they released saying that they are a apolitical organization. They don't participate in geopolitics, or that from that we can assume they're not doing this for geopolitical reasons, somewhat distancing themselves from Russia potentially or other state actors. And they do not need to tie us with a defined government. Yeah, they're clearly making verbal motions to distance themselves from any government organization. And then they say their stated goal is to make money and not creating problems for society. And even further than that, they are saying they are using their money for public good, kind of social justice purposes even. And they say they've already started doing that. And then what Krebs gets into in this article, it says, at the launch, DarkSide sought to woo affiliates from competing ransomware programs by advertising a victim data leak site that gets stable visits and media coverage, as well as the ability to publish victim data by stages under the Why Choose Us heading of the ransomware program. And he takes screenshots from the DarkSide website, which is on the dark web. And so this is the first time for many people who don't surf the dark web where they're going to be able to see screenshots from this ransomware gang called DarkSide, the screenshots from their own website as to their product, which, as we covered on day 2 or 3, they're marketing themselves as ransomware as a service, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek twist on the idea of software as a service. Ransomware is software. It's a specific type of software that, holds companies for ransom. So ransomware as a service, and they say why you should use our ransomware as a service platform as opposed to their competitors, for example. And then they go into the details of what it looks like when they target someone and it says your network has been locked, and there's screenshots all about it. Again, you can see this article with all of the screenshots from the DarkSide website. Now it's the top tweet in the Tech News Around the World Twitter account. And it goes into victim conversations where it shows the back and forth between DarkSide and the people they are extorting, essentially. Victim replies and complaints to DarkSide. And then it kind of summarizes that experts say ransomware attacks will continue to grow in sophistication, frequency, and cost unless something is done to disrupt the ability of crooks to get paid for such crimes, which is, of course, true. And that's, of course, why the pipeline is not going to be paying these extortionists any money. They're just going to fix the problem mechanically, physically, and decouple the digital controls from the physical pipes, something they perhaps didn't consider fully before doing this. And they already claim to be well underway in that process. According to a report late last year from Coveware, the average ransomware payment in the third quarter of 2020 was, as we said yesterday, around $200,000, up 31% from the second quarter. So it's interesting they're using like quarterly report type language.
This is the funny part, Tyler.
Yeah, in reporting, the average ransomware, increased year over year, as if we're investing in these like their stock or publicly traded companies or something. And so the average ransom is up 31% from the second quarter of last year. Security firm MCSoft found that almost 2,400 U.S.-based governments, healthcare facilities, and schools were victims of ransomware in 2020. Last month, a group of tech industry heavyweights lent their imprimatur to a task force that delivered an 81-page report to the Biden administration on ways to stymie the ransomware industry. Among many other recommendations, the report urged the White House to make finding, frustrating, and apprehending ransomware crooks a priority within the U.S. intelligence community and to designate the current scourge of digital extortion as a national security threat. And to that point, that's where it gets very interesting, because if the outcome of this cyber attack or ransom attack is causing potential deaths of some kind, if people are freezing to death, thank God it's not winter right now, or there's actual real casualties as a result of this, should not the U.S. respond in kind, that this is a kind of a war-like threat, even though it's not a state actor, and launch missiles at the homes of whoever is behind this, if they feel that they have very validated, double-confirmed sources on this, and just to essentially send a signal to people to think twice before doing something like this. That could be an interesting vote for the audience. What is the appropriate level of response from the state to discourage this kind of behavior, which is clearly escalating, because this is an issue within technology generally, where as we digitize everything, and we started with our phones, that was the first thing to become essentially digitized. We went from phones to smartphones, and then homes to smart homes, and office to smart office, and cities to smart cities. And you're going to have smart everything eventually by putting all these chips in it. The problem is we are smartifying everything faster than we can secure it. That's the problem.
Well, Tyler, this is exactly, but to jump in there, that this is the whole IoT thing, right? Like, you're never going to cover up all of these different exposures, right? So,
well, you could watch this though. Here, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you could, if you held somebody responsible along the way. For example, if the semiconductor or network suppliers were held liable, then the progress would be much, much, much slower, but then people would be personally and economically responsible.
But even at that level, Tyler, there's still, as people build, to your point, as people build out these systems and the interconnections, like when I was at Accenture, I mean, that's what we dealt with, was the IoT. And the IoT is that you don't know at the start, like they're like privacy by design, security by design, et cetera. You don't know at the start where they're going to end up hooking in and how and the function. So to your point, and then the other one was when you said that these guys hadn't disconnected maybe their systems from these controls, and it's like who knew at the time that they created these things? Like, I bet some of these systems are older. And then I love their whole market analysis on the 31% up over
Yeah,
time.
I
And
know,
I would
right?
like to see well, I want to see the SLAs in their their RAAS agreement.
Right.
I would just like to actually, I'm going to become their new attorney and just be like, okay, this is not, I'm serious.
Yeah, why use those other lousy ransomware gangs when you can use ours and notice our performance over the past 4 quarters? Yeah.
Tyler, can I just
Yeah.
add on to this?
Sure.
Yeah, I just came across this article on NBC News. Hackers release personal info of 22 DC police officers, and they're threatening to release a lot more.
That sounds like the one that predated the Colonial Pipeline. There was a police station that was hacked in a very similar way, and
Exactly.
I imagine
Yeah.
look at the date on that. Does it predate? What's the date on that?
It was first hacked in April.
Right.
But May 12th is, I mean, today for me, but
Yes.
May 12th is when the news came out on
Yes.
this.
Yeah. Well,
saying they have published the profiles of first 5 officers, then they published
correct.
22, and then
it's
they keep on publishing.
it's quite possible that it's the same DarkSide ransomware that's behind that. And we touched on that article briefly about 2 weeks ago when it happened, and I made the comment that these hackers who are behind this police station hack are either incredibly stupid or incredibly capable, because you're really begging to have the full weight of the CIA's counter cyber espionage team come down on you full throttle when you start going after government agencies.
So the article does say that it's a different group. They don't mention the group name, but they say it's different from the pipeline guys.
Yeah, well, that would be only now discernible because of as we've said for the past few days now regarding the pipeline hack is, I mean, the problem is the more activity that happens, the more of a trail that is developed over time, and historically this doesn't work out well for DarkSide, because historically the vast majority of bad actors in this way inevitably get caught. So maybe they could be one of the first to pull a real long-term strategy. We'll see. Time will tell.
Tyler, just quickly tying it to one that we've talked about before. Remember, we had a really nice, good noodle on the whole GCHQ coming out with, basically admitting that they're kind of behind China. I think it was maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. The so what is there's 2 threads I want to pick up on. One is are those articles are probably coming out because those people in positions of power and the security service are saying stuff like this going on, which these guys are basically saying come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. It's kind of very so I think they're massively under pressure. The second thought I had was the way you said if we could go and target them and take them out. I mean, I was, as you know, a commando in the Royal Marines and saw some fun stuff going on all over the place, the Special Boat Squadron and all these people who did stuff. And so the so what is there's massive capability inside the military, and I don't know. I mean, I may sound a little silly saying it, but I'm not sure why we don't deploy more weight in these situations to just, it's back to your frame of when it's labeled something.
Yeah, there's not enough disincentives.
Yeah. I was kind of reading up on this, and I came across this interesting stuff where they held a few hacking competitions in America, and then a few Chinese guys kind of modeled after this, and they found vulnerabilities in Apple's Safari browser, and you were able to spy on people and a bunch of this stuff. So, I mean, my understanding is that you might have the most resources on the planet, but it's almost impossible for you to kind of fix every hole that is there across a multiple decentralized infrastructure as this.
Right. And that gets into the conversation of will this problem, the current quote unquote solutions to this are, the cyber security startups mainly based out of Tel Aviv that are making a nice, profit. There's a lot of Israeli unicorns and future unicorns growing to solve this problem, which is fine, but it's kind of like a a Band-Aid type approach to the problem rather than kind of trying to fix it at its source. And that's where I wonder if there's a conversation to be had around how to strategically address this from the source, or politically, or economically, or there's a few different ways to address this. May.
Tyler,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting dynamic what you're sharing, and those three statements that you said on how to solve the problem or what potentially could solve the problem. Dave said something really, really spot on. I have a really good friend of mine who hacked into NASA when he was 19 years old, and then he went into the Army. And even though he's my age or a year older than me, he's still connected to the Army, and he is basically a penetration specialist, which is what we call hackers that know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
But let me take it to what you said, linking in what Dave said, because there is intelligence in the military that's being, in some ways, I think as a project manager, it's not being resourced properly. That's just my perspective. But on the flip side is, in the crypto space, in the decentralized finance space, what many of these companies are doing now is they're creating bounties. They're actually incentivizing these nefarious hackers that are probably, with all due respect, and I'm just going to throw it out there, I would laugh my ass off if this is like a 16-year-old just trying to piss someone off. I'm just saying, I would just laugh,
Yeah.
Because it tends to happen that way, because these kids are brilliant, but they're sitting at home and they're just messing around. It's like back when we were younger, aging myself, where we'd make the prank phone calls of dominoes and stuff. It's like this could also be their version of their pranking people, or just being, just taking a piss, right? But the key is that in the crypto and DeFi space, they are actually setting bounties in place to say, look, you have hacked our exchange, you exploited a vulnerability. We're going to keep it anonymous because you found a vulnerability, but we want to give you a bounty. And actually 9 out of 10 times, the person has taken the bounty and it's been fixed. And that's the interesting part about it, is that human nature would say, if this is not the bigger nefarious players and it's just smaller players, then there has to be the ability to align where they're sitting on the spectrum. And I do believe there's going to be a massive industry coming around cybersecurity, because as an on-chain analyst through Singapore for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and just being able to see the nodes and see where the tracks of the transactions are going, the FBI is already connected to Chainalysis in Singapore. Excuse me?
Amy, this is already a huge industry, and these bounties, these are already set up all for in
True,
every
but in the
industry,
cryptocurrency space, Jennifer, with all due respect, in the cryptocurrency space and the DeFi space, they've just been built, because a lot of them are building new programs. So yes, they've been there, but there are also new programs that are coming up. As Tyler was saying, we're moving very fast, and I was actually in my MBA, we did the relationship with the IoT in Sweden. Nyanrota University did do something in partnership with Sweden for IoT, Internet of Things, and how to make a whole city smart. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think it was it begins with a K. The university begins with a K in Sweden. And I think it was a technical university, and we were looking at the problems that were going to come out.
KTH, Côte d'Or.
Yes, correct. We were looking, and the gentleman that was saying about this can't be fixed, let's kind of roll that back statement, because let's just be super, super transparent. If the United States was able to pull in Trump for 4 years, anything's possible. So I don't like these definitive statements of can't or only, because where there's a will, there's a way. And the reality is retraining the mindset and restructuring the organizational infrastructure to align and recognize these nefarious characters before they start to pop up. And this is what the crypto space is noticing, is that they're seeing that these individuals are already kind of like popping in there, and they're noticing them. And in some ways, I think they're doing something quite interesting, because they're bringing them up ahead of time. And that's actually how my friend got hired by the military, and actually got hired to be the CTO and CIO of Ogilvy and Mather. So now, and he's on the Rocks books. He's on one of those red books, those big, thick, obnoxious books that I can't really get all the time. But he's on the cover of one of those books. So he's actually become an educator to this space. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. We have to look at where it's going to go, where it's going to be able to find industry from, and what that new industry is going to look like, because we're going to die off someday, but the next generation is going to have to take it up.
So I have.
Can I make a comment first? Can you please don't combine blockchain with cryptocurrency because it's a separate thing.
Actually, Cheryl, cryptocurrency is built on blockchain, so the technology is there. So,
but the technology is a blockchain technology.
Correct,
it's
but
not
also,
but Cheryl's point, to both your points, Cheryl's correct. Blockchain is separate from crypto. Crypto's on blockchain, but it's just one use on blockchain, right? So
it's decentralized ledger technology. I know I'm a blockchain developer. If I'm speaking of crypto, it's because it's how people resonate with blockchain tech. With all due respect, blockchain tech is something that scares people away to learn.
Nope, that's not true.
Okay, Cheryl, but that's your opinion. Cheryl, that's your opinion.
No, but you are. I agree with Cheryl. We are combining things that are technically separate. You can
and
put
again,
a lot.
Jennifer and Cheryl, those are your opinions, and that's it.
She's
and
doing
they're
it
being acknowledged.
Yeah, she's doing that because from her experience, people get confused and scared away by the word blockchain. You don't, because you understand what it is. But if you're speaking to a general public audience and you start talking about blockchain, their eyes glaze over and they have no idea what the reference
and
point
is. And you lose them because
she's explaining to you why she's using the word crypto instead of blockchain, because crypto is an understandable concept and blockchain is not, and that's why she's
and it's also my speaking.
Cheryl, to you it's very clear. To my mom, it's not, and that's why she's doing it. That's her point.
But if you keep using crypto, people will get turned off because crypto is always linked to.
Some people,
actually the opposite.
Some people not. So it's just Amy's
right.
It's about access.
It's not. I'm going to go with Cheryl. If you're doing supply chain management or anything else on blockchain, that's not crypto.
Correct.
Okay.
I work in supply chain management, Cheryl. I work with them.
She's very, very, very aware of all.
For 18 years, Jennifer, please.
She's making a calculated decision as an expert on the subject, having had that conversation hundreds of times. When talking about the technical details of these issues, it's far easier for the general layperson to grasp the conversation when they're in the context of a crypto rather than as a blockchain, which is hard conceptually for people to grasp. I understand why she's doing it, and it is to people who have a deeper understanding of it, they wonder why she's intentionally, sort of conflating the two. She's very clear in her own mind as to why she's using one example over the other, just for the benefit of the people who don't have the experience that you have, which is most of the room in the vast majority of cases. So
this topic is, Tyler, this topic is triggering for people because it does move into one to the other. So it's completely appreciated that some people will kind of go, oh, hang on, it's two different things. But just to underpin that Amy actually understands both of those pieces and she's making, as you said, because on the other room that on the Crypto Bytes room, she's been through the whole fashion industry using blockchain as a kind of construct to create that supply chain. So completely understands it and is making a choice in this thing. And it might. So you point out that it might trigger some people, but it's a choice. And thanks.
I have some perspective on the security thing. Can I?
One second, Hakeem. Cal, I just want to get it in. That Palantir article that you shared this morning, I thought was super interesting. It'd be great if we can discuss that, holding it, and then when we're fully.
If you want to discuss that, I'll give it context. And the broader thing is, and it's up to Tyler. You can orchestrate this, Tyler. But the thing that on Palantir said they might buy Bitcoin to put on their balance sheet. Okay, so obviously Tesla's done that, and I don't know if we've had this discussion in this forum. Maybe we can have it now, maybe later in the later time zone, maybe in the Crypto Byte thing. But the whole, and this is accessible, right, to people who work in large companies. Large companies, and there's a guy called Michael Sayer, which might be worth educating people about the Bitcoin and crypto people here. He's kind of a leader in this whole construct. He's got his own company that you can buy shares in, which are mostly Bitcoin now, effectively, and he's kind of a Bitcoin proxy. It's called MicroStrategy. But what's interesting is this discussion about large companies putting Bitcoin in their balance sheet, right? How much are they doing it? What they're doing? There's also a related discussion to that. So Palantir, obviously, there's a headline where Palantir is thinking about it, and I just kind of tweeted that. But there's a related discussion to that around, what does Warren Buffett do if Apple puts Bitcoin in its balance sheet? Does he change his investment thesis around that, Munger? And so that's the discussion. I leave it to Tyler whether we have it here, just in terms of the flow, or we have it somewhere else.
I want to close on the political, because what we're essentially doing is starting to bucketize the conversation. So at this moment, we're on kind of a political issue around the pipeline. I want to go through the politics points quickly, especially with David in the room, and they had a fantastic discussion about similar to the discussion we had in here yesterday about the China's population data and the political issues around that. So let's go through the political issues, which is the pipeline for sure. And let's give a chance for other people to bring up other political issues before we get into crypto and blockchain, which is actually a totally separate issue, because the pipeline, we should never have gotten into the crypto conversation as it relates to the pipeline. That was we were going down.
Good shot.
Because
I have 60 seconds on the security.
Once you get into a crypto conversation, you have a hard time clawing your way out of it into what the original point was about, which was about the hacking and the political pipeline and what should be the government's response against hacking and this pandemic of hacking. And that's maybe not the right choice of words given the age of COVID we're in, but there is hacking is becoming a bigger and a bigger issue quarter by quarter, no pun intended, and how to deal with it. There is the issue of bug bounties, which many of my friends participate in, and my friend Jane won a Twitter bounty yesterday that she just tweeted. And that is one of the current strategies, is the companies are saying, hey, we know we have vulnerabilities. Please try and hack them. And if you do, we will pay you money for doing so, for exposing our own weaknesses to us. And without exploiting them and monetizing them yourself, we will monetize them for you by paying you to expose them. And that is the default. And HackerOne is the kind of leading platform in that way out of Helsinki. And the top hackers on the HackerOne platform are personal friends of mine. So those are the penetration testers that Ami was
Some
referring to.
cybersecurity people are joining us on the stage.
Great.
Andre and a few others. So yeah, let's do this. It's good.
Great. So let's hope that
I have
Ralph.
a quick view.
So Ralph should join up here, and hopefully the gentleman who initiated this topic will come back and join us, so we can close the loop on it. But I did tweet it, and there is a nice deep dive for people who really want to go deep on that issue, and I encourage people to go deep on this issue, because this is perhaps the beginnings of a much bigger issue to come. This pipeline could be the foreshadowing of something even far bigger and scarier within the near future. So that's why it's interesting for people to get really up to speed on it. Ralph, take it.
But I have to counter that point, sorry.
Go ahead.
This is not actually new, right? So we had the same issue in Saudi Arabia in 2012, where lockers basically crypted one of the crucial, the data of one of the crucial companies there. Yeah. And oil production was halted for a while. So this is not a new thing.
Right.
So what's new, I think, is that these ransomware crews are getting more and more professionalized. So this is like, DarkSide, who has perpetrated, or actually like an affiliate of DarkSide. So how this works is basically there's people who write this stuff,
right,
and they have affiliates who basically then
utilize it,
buy access to networks,
correct,
from other people, and then they drop that stuff.
Right. Similar to the Israeli Pegasus app that people use to then do either good or bad things with it. Yeah.
Well, it's different because the structure there is more loose.
It's a different Pegasus, process. It's rather than an app. It's a platform. Yes.
It's a government that usually buys this
correct
access from NSO, and this is it's just a loosely affiliated group, and whoever is able to pay the fee is able to get this locker and is able to drop it. Well, there's some vetting process apparently, but I mean, that's the general strategy. Now, I think one of the changes that we're seeing is as of yesterday, the French insurer AXA has announced that they will no longer pay ransoms. So that's going to make things interesting, right, because usually what these people depend on is that it's not the company's bottom line that
the insurance company,
but it's get it right. That the insurance companies,
and so the insurance companies are now standing up to say, "Fuck that! Well, that's not part of our business model." Right.
Right. But in general, with regard to bug bounties, I'm somewhat I'm not sure that's the right approach. I mean, in general, I do participate in bug bounties as well, but my impression is that a lot of companies these days take bug bounties as an alternative to having a solid security program, which is not
true,
good.
which is
So
not
that's not good.
scalable, right?
Right, and I mean, in principle, we've had the same problems for the last 40 years. I mean, memory corruption bugs. I grew up with that shit. Like, I was 16 when I wrote my first exploit for memory corruption. I would not have guessed that I'm like 43 or going to 44 and that I can still write the same shit, right?
Exactly.
This is fucking ridiculous.
It is.
But yeah, so like
because
we have to get
it's
better.
not a scalable solution, because every company shouldn't have to figure out their vulnerabilities on their own. It should be more of a systematic approach. Yeah, Marvin, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys spoke about this before I joined the call, but if I didn't, forgive me if I'm repeating something. The article that I read articulated two interesting points. The first one was that the hack did not get into the infrastructure architecture. It got into the back office administrative architecture.
That's what I understand.
That's what you usually say in terms of damage control. Yeah. You don't know this until like things happen. So
well,
you would not.
You can't say you can't.
Let me just finish the other point.
Well, I just want to say there's huge.
So when I finish the second point,
go ahead.
Thank you. The second point, which must be coupled to this first point, is that the company denied FBI support, and so these two points together raise flags. They raise flags in a very way that require further interrogation.
Right. That's a good point. That of course the company has to say that it was, but there does seem to be some credibility to their claims that it was not into the physical and only stayed in the kind of digital threat of things. That seems to be playing out if their claims that they've already started repairing the problem are to be believed. They seem to be rather transparent with how they're addressing it in the press. Anyways, Ralph, you wanted to make another comment? And then Andre, I saw you wanted to chime in.
Let Andrew go first.
Okay, go ahead, Andre, and welcome.
No, I mean, Marvin, you made some excellent points there. Someone had mentioned earlier, how do we address this? I mean, I've been a security professional, or at least played one in some part of my life. And in all of my roles, this is what I've seen. I've seen developers who balk at including security processes and standards in the life cycle, whether it be software of a product. So in the sense of like some of these IoT or these ICS devices that are in, power plants and things like that, I can only imagine what the QA process, at least, or any involvement of security in it. It was probably zero. And that's the reason why we are seeing increasingly, to all of our amazement, that some of these hacks are taking place. Just a couple months ago, there was a water treatment system. I can't remember the state where a hacker had got into the actual infrastructure and was mucking around with the particular chemicals that were used to treat the water. Luckily, they didn't cause any harm, but they were in the system.
Right.
We've had SolarWinds with supply chain, and now we have this pipeline. So to your point, Tyler, yes, the hackers are letting us know, they are putting us on notice that they are in the systems, and they have full reign into them. But until organizations, and companies start really taking, putting some serious effort behind security and following some type of security standards and security practices in the life cycle of a product or software, we will continually have these, and it doesn't just stop there.
Yep.
And I'll just make this point. It also is in patching. It's also in patching and making sure that they do vulnerability assessments. Because if not, we are going to continue to see this in news.
Yeah.
I have to counter that point again. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So the case with the Colonial Pipeline, they weren't hit via some IoT crap, right? So my understanding is, this is not entirely clear, but the speculation is that they were hit with an exploit for Microsoft Exchange. Now, Microsoft is not a company where you would say that they don't have a developed SDLC, like a security development lifecycle. So like, even if you're at the top of the game in terms of like training your developers, making sure that they write solid code and so on, that seems to be not good enough. So we probably have to take some other approaches. And some of these approaches will be technical, and others may be may take a different direction as well. So a friend of mine yesterday, I'm not sure whether this blog post is public already, the Grug mentioned that he had an idea where basically you would pool together and try to hire as many of the ransomware developers into legit work, to make sure that they don't work for the syndicates that perpetrate these attacks. That's a good idea. I'm not sure whether that's going to work, but I think it's worth trying.
Well, the nation states that are paying these guys are going to pay bigger dollars. I'm sure that they're going to have a hard time corralling these other guys together.
Not clear. I don't think these are being paid by Russia, and for North Korea, yeah, they're not paying that well. And well, I mean, they for North Korean hackers, they usually don't have a way out, right? So that's a different strategy. But where is that music coming from?
That's Tyler. That's Tyler.
That's coming from Tech News Around the World. That's just.
He was seriously worried. He was worried where that music was coming from.
That's coming from.
They're coming for me.
It's coming from the Kremlin. Yeah,
I feel the scare there.
Yeah, that's the music about conspiracy theory. It's okay.
And Ralph, I'm a big fan of the Grug, by the way. Let him know that. I mean, it's going to be interesting because you mentioned that it was a Microsoft Exchange
that's the alleged.
Allegedly, right?
Now
that's funny because not even a month ago, Microsoft came out with an advisory notifying folks to update their Exchange service because of a remote code execution vulnerability that was out in the wild and was being exploited. I'd be very interested to know if they didn't patch that server.
Probably
vulnerability.
But at the same time, there have been multiple. Like there has been one advisor, but there have been multiple vulnerabilities in Exchange. Like if you look at last Pwn to Own, I think there were 3 entries against Exchange, and that was, I think, after this other vulnerability was disclosed.
Right.
So
yep.
So check this out. You want the music. What you want a real wild theory about state actors? I had, when this first started, Cal, you can confirm. I said this might actually be a head fake, a distraction, a magician's trick of some kind. Remember that?
3 days ago.
Yes, 3 days ago I said that. And
I remember that.
Yeah, you remember that, right? And since then, today, Netanyahu tells America, don't bother even looking at what's happening in Jerusalem, right? And Israel is the best, cybersecurity forces in the world, or in Tel Aviv.
They are.
Oh man!
Pay no attention to what's going on over here.
Pay no attention to what's happening in Jerusalem. You're a little distracted with your pipeline at the moment. So this is not my. By the way, this is a DM that I received. By the way, I'm saying this because I got a DM saying that this is a distraction to preoccupy America to not focus on Jerusalem being led by Israel, because we were talking about maybe it's the Kremlin or Russia or North Korea, and someone's like, no, it's probably Israel because they have the means to really do this. And why would Israel do it? Well, that's why the X-Files music comes in.
I don't even think it's a state actor at this point. I think it's just some poor dude who hit the wrong company, right? It's like, oh, there's money there. Oh shit, no.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna be fucking drone. Shit, man.
Yes, it's the dog who caught the ambulance metaphor. Yeah.
Right.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Akil.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Ladies first in this room.
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to make note of a funny thing I saw, which DarkSide had posted on their website on the dark web, that they were kind of walking back or making an apology of sorts. They mentioned that they were apolitical, and it almost seemed like they were trying to kind of absolve and clarify, which was ironic to see, like almost like a press statement from them. But I don't know if this is too much of a stretch, but when you're talking about solutions, I work for a federal like defense contractor, and something that I thought was really fascinating that I don't see like too much press on is that last year towards the end of the summer, we were all federal contractors who work with either GSA or NASA or DoD. A couple more are supposed to be compliant with this new policy called Section 889, which is that we can't use any telecommunications equipment that is covered. Generally, this comes down to Huawei or ZTE, and a couple other included companies. And the policy is really fuzzy still, and it's continuing to kind of play out, and companies are still trying to understand exactly what it means to be compliant. But I thought that these somewhat narrow and targeted kind of policies are kind of interesting, and maybe after this incident could be applied to even the private sector. Probably not very realistic, but even the private sector where it deals with critical infrastructure or energy, because it is leaving us kind of vulnerable. And obviously it is nothing new, but I thought it was something that was kind of interesting and maybe could be applied or extended, but unfortunately it's probably really broad as of now.
I want to welcome up Herlin. This seems to be right in your wheelhouse, Herlin. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Can I go now?
Yeah. Let's do Akil. Make your. I know you have a quick story to share, and then I want to have Herlin, and then my apologies. My Chinese character reading is not so strong. My Japanese kanji is pretty good, but of course it's not Japanese too. Fei Talks will give you the floor as well, but go ahead, Akil.
Yeah, so I got hacked by ransomware in 2018. My company, basically, we were about 9 guys whose laptops and office desktops got compromised because somebody injected some interesting piece of code into our servers. Then we sat down with the cybersecurity guys and they kind of patched it up for us. But what they explained to us in layman's terms was there's 2 ways you can get hacked. It's not just your software, but your people can get hacked too.
Yeah, social hacking, yeah.
Social hacking. And they said, contrary to popular belief, human beings are easier to be compromised.
Much easier.
Much easier to be compromised.
Yeah, you leave a USB stick laying on the sidewalk next to somebody's car in the parking lot, and next thing you know, they put it in their computer at work and you're hacked, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, right? Or somebody can find out your mother's maiden name and then suddenly you've given away your company's email address password.
Yeah.
So we went through a bit of training where they said don't open certain types of emails, don't open files on these systems, whatnot. We went through basic human training to secure the human being part of things also.
In fact, the big DNC hacks, the Democratic National Party, was a social hack. So when they all fell for it, I mean, it was an email hack with a link, but they were falling for the most amateurish, social hacks of all time.
So my angle on this is with certain things like pipelines and whatnot, these are pretty heavily guarded infrastructure. So I don't think that they just hacked software and got done with it. I think certain employees might be compromised in this, and that hasn't come out.
The thing to keep in mind, though, is there's so much attention on this pipeline hack that every detail of it will be revealed over the days to come. All the way up until the apprehension of the people involved. I mean, that's just the inevitability of how this is going to roll out, and we're going to watch it play by play, and we can speculate day by day as we're doing right now, but we don't need to spend too much time on it because it will unfold hour by hour, day by day, until it's all resolved. But I want to hear from Herlin as well, Ralph, of course, and then Fei Talks. It looks like this might be relevant to your background as well, so I just want to make sure you had the time to comment if you choose to. Okay, go Herlin if you want to go, or Marvin, or who else was?
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to say that. So the issue really is about resource allocation for the event, and I think that a lot of what the government's doing is making this a big deal in order to reappropriate agency resources, like coordinating, getting the NSA interested, getting the FBI interested, getting the CIA interested, and making the story within the community exciting enough to get them part into it. Because that's what happens is that if the issue isn't that exciting or isn't that, impactful, they're like, yeah, we don't care. We're busy doing something else.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, but this, because it's of a national security interest, they kicked the bee's nest, and now
bingo.
That's why they're apologizing. Like, oh shit, because it's not in their interest to get the big NSA CIA types involved. They would prefer to aim at targets, on the lower hanging fruit. Yeah.
DarkSide has made these clarifications before, so they have excluded hospitals and other critical infrastructure. So they have actually a pretty decent policy. I mean, they try to extract money, they try to make money, and they try to not piss people off.
Yes, but in part so that they don't attract even
of course,
the wrath of the government, the full power. Nest. Yeah, the nuclear weapons and the drone attacks on their own homes. Of course, that's just sort of common sense. But they kind of took it a little too far this time, and now maybe to the benefit of the whole ecosystem. Yeah.
I have two questions. Who in the room was familiar with the importance of Colonial Pipeline before this happened? Because I have never heard that name before.
I was.
Okay.
I grew up in New Jersey, where they have they're located in Woodbury, New Jersey, or Woodbridge, New Jersey. I was familiar with them.
Okay. And the second one, is anyone aware of any Chinese company that ever got ransomware?
We wouldn't know. China has a closed wall.
Say again?
No, Tadis says yes. I'm saying I don't think we would have got as much as news as we should have.
I'm sorry. What is the
even
question?
if it happened, it will not be announced to the world. It will be kept inside the wall.
But you'd still find it on Weibo or something, right? No.
Sorry, what's his question?
What's the
please?
point behind the question, Ralph? What's the point behind the question? Just.
Well, I'm trying to figure out whether there's an aversion to some actors of hitting certain companies in certain countries.
That's a conspiracy.
Can repeat it one more time. I'm sorry.
So I'm trying to figure out whether there's an aversion by actors who perpetrate these ransomware attacks to hit certain countries.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, well, it was reported that the DarkSide's platform is not usable against countries that use Cyrillic alphabets, for example. That was revealed yesterday.
They have a specific section in their contract saying that you're not allowed to use it in the CIS, which is the Commonwealth of Independent States or something. It's like the former USSR kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm not too familiar with that.
Which is why there's speculation that it has ties to Russia and Eastern Europe because they use Cyrillic alphabets.
Oh yeah, and because it's also it's advertised in all the usual Russian places.
Perhaps, yeah. But like I said, this will all shake out in days to come. But I wanted to thank the person who so emotionally threw it as the first topic on the table and wanted to circle back to see how they felt about our dive on it and give them the opportunity to comment on it as well. But I don't see.
Tyler, you're absolutely bossing this topic, and I think there's a good bit of excitement in the room for the next installment. Is how I'm feeling.
Sure, I am too. Yeah, but I mean, it'll be again. This is chapter 1 of potentially a super exciting book. What is chapter 2 in this book of now that these exploits are not just they can be targeted at critical infrastructure. This raises huge issues, and as somebody mentioned, it's not the first time that an oil pipeline, there was the Saudi Arabia pipeline in the past, and then there was water treatment plants that were targeted. And what's next, right? That's where it gets very very interesting.
One more point I want to make is that it did. The news did report that the event activated national security protocol in regards to, and so once you trigger that opens up a variety of budgets, tools, and resources and protocols that you could not do prior to that.
Precisely.
Wait, is one of the protocols where you go through the rest of infrastructure and look for compromised areas?
Well, I know that what it will do is it'll activate the cybersecurity reserve units that are state by state, and they can respond immediately to this. Whether or not they go searching they'll probably start and do a discovery, a little reconnaissance, and then publish an SOP internally. And then based upon that SOP, they'll start to create more actions.
Yeah. So let's do. So we've done the. I want to see if there are other political. There is a couple of other political headlines to jump into while we're still on the politics point. There's Uber and Lyft are offering free rides to vaccine sites, and as much heat as Uber and Lyft get from time to time in conversations, in Clubhouse, but Uber and Lyft will offer free rides to and from U.S. vaccination sites until the 4th of July, partnering with the Biden administration, which is providing the site data. This is in the Wall Street Journal and CNN, TechCrunch, and Gadget, CNBC, and others. New transportation partnership comes as Biden administration explores new ways to encourage people to get vaccinated. I just want to applaud everyone involved on that front. That's tech doing some really good. However we feel about the politics, let's applaud good behaviors like that when we see them and call them out as such. There's another political headline worth drawing attention to today, which could start a whole other conversation, which is about WhatsApp data, the WhatsApp's new data policy, which WhatsApp details the experience for those who don't agree to its new privacy policy, including losing access to calls, messages, and notifications. WhatsApp will eventually stop users sending and receiving messages if they refuse their new privacy policy. If users do not agree to the policy, their features will eventually subside. And the headline is, WhatsApp will gradually stop you calling or messaging contacts if you don't agree to its new privacy policy. Which I guess that's well within their, right to do. So,
and the Germans banned it.
Yeah, and the Germans, not surprisingly, as a result of these things and being kind of the front runners on all things around data collection, personal privacy data issues, the GDPR, etc. Germany does not play games, and they're quite hardballish on these points. And they say, we don't play those games, get out. So it's again something to watch, and it's an interesting intersection of big tech. In this case, Facebook is the owners of WhatsApp, and then governments, and how different governments relate to big tech, and how they have these little, standoffs of these kind of power struggles. And let's see who comes out on top in some of these struggles. And it'll
important link with payments there, Tyler.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, because WhatsApp is trying to enable payments across Brazil at the moment. And they have aspirations to roll that out across Africa. So you're right. This becomes incredibly interesting indeed. Yeah. So I want to welcome up Simon from South Africa. He often has headlines to share from Africa. And I believe it was Simon who introduced us to Mabwana. And so I have to thank him for that. Welcome back, Simon.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah. Morning from Johannesburg. Just this issue around WhatsApp. I mean, maybe you could do one of your, Tyler, you could do one of your polls and see how many people would be prepared to, let's say, sacrifice their privacy to continue using WhatsApp.
Oh, great question.
I was giving a course to a whole bunch of more elderly people yesterday, and this exact issue came up, and I was telling them about how they would get these persistent messages, and eventually they would lose all their access. And I said, really, it's a question of whether, certainly a lot of people now, most of their let's call it their asynchronous communication now is on WhatsApp.
Right.
And is there going to be are they prepared to sacrifice their privacy to use that, or are they going to move off? Maybe a younger generation would move off, but I know there's a whole lot of older people who are happy with WhatsApp and would stay on there.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, being in Thailand, which is Bangkok is the most visited city on the planet, statistically, by far, actually. And as such, we get people from all over the world who visit Thailand. From really, literally, the entire world comes to Thailand. And being here as I am and encountering tourists from all over, I've come to realize that the most common app for connecting with people from random around the world is WhatsApp. It's not even close. Even more than Facebook Messenger and any other app you can think of, WhatsApp is the global default for kind of if you're going to have any two random people from around the world, how they're going to communicate is likely WhatsApp. So it's an interesting point, especially as you said, when we get into the fintech futuristic leanings and ambitions that WhatsApp has, and now that they're blocked from Germany, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The poll's interesting, but so is the conversation. So we can let's see what else people think about this WhatsApp data policy issue. Is there anyone there was a couple of people who had their hands up that I wanted to welcome. Black Alchemist, and thank you, Simon, for raising this issue, and thank you, because I think it was you had introduced us to Mabwana, or the other gentleman that Mabwana had invested in on the continent, which is, by the way, yeah, it was And Simon, just so you know, because it's been a few days since we've seen you here, the next big monthly kind of Shark Tank event where we get investors and startups together to do actual real pitches for real money. The next one is focused on Africa, which you may know already, but that's going to be on the 27th of May. And you can see that in the calendar of this room by clicking on the title of this room, and you'll see the Tech News calendar. If you look at all of the events that we now host, because we host more than just Tech News around the world twice each day. There's a crypto room and a medtech room and VR rooms like we had last night about the HTC live stream event, etc. The last room in the carousel is the Tech News around the world plus what we call the Tech Meetup, which is where we have the investors and the startups pitch for real money, like we did around Asia last month, and one of the startups did get funding as a result of that, which is very common because we take great care to pick awesome investors that are very sincere about writing checks, and awesome startups who are very sincere about accepting those checks. And we put them on stage together and let the magic happen. And we're going to do that again, focused on African investors and African startups on May 27th. So I hope you can join us for that. Yeah.
No, I've put that on LinkedIn already.
Oh, great. Thanks.
The only issue is, of course, is like you have, in Thailand, the majority of people here are on Android.
Right.
And although Clubhouse, we know that they've announced it, but they haven't rolled it out to Africa
Precisely.
yet.
Precisely.
So,
great
a
point.
number of those people are not going to be able to get on.
Precisely right. Yeah, we got to think about how to circumvent that somehow. Great point. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's rolled out to all of Android by end of the month.
Right.
I'll be the title as we have the 27th.
Well, Mabwana, if you only knew somebody at Clubhouse that you could put that bug in their ear about that would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, shit! I should ask him.
Anyway,
Tyler,
I'm already getting it's terrible. I'm starting to get a lot of people saying, "Oh, this community guidelines is not working for us." Chinese speakers on Clubhouse telling me to ping Paul to fix stuff. I'm like,
he's got his hands full, no doubt. Yeah, Dave.
No, I was just saying it'd be cool to squeeze in a little plug because I know that there's a whole bunch of events going on in this audience.
Yeah.
We'll have great stuff going on tonight, but I don't know when. I'm just reminding or putting it in there.
Well, just it's getting it's becoming a beautiful problem now that a lot of the regular speakers on stage are hosting deep dive rooms, as I've chosen to call them. We had two last night simultaneously. Ben on stage did a deep dive on medtech, which was fantastic. And simultaneous to that, Victoria and Michael were doing a deep dive room on VR, AR, because of the HTC ViveCon live stream event that was going on simultaneously. So unfortunately, it was the first time where we had to kind of give the audience not a bad problem, a great problem, where they had a choice of two different topic deep dive rooms to go into. I bounced between both and enjoyed both very much. But you can see in the calendar the other deep dive rooms that are now scheduled for the week. They cover a lot of different topics. And so with Michelle on stage, Michelle, we're talking about the WhatsApp, because Michelle brilliantly helps us contextualize these issues around when we talk about Facebook, because you can't talk about VR without talking about Facebook. You can't talk about WhatsApp and Facebook and social media. And she does a masterful job of enlightening us to points that are often sorely missing when having these conversations. But Michelle, in case you're just joining us, we were talking about the WhatsApp new data policy, which Germany doesn't care much for, which is in the headlines today around WhatsApp gradually stopping calling and messaging of contacts to users who don't agree with their new privacy policy. And we were going to ask the audience, how do they feel about that? Would they be willing to have potentially less privacy to continue using WhatsApp?
I don't know if I'm going to be very brief because I'm on the go and I've been listening most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a kind of an official response to that yet. Okay. But as you know, we're rolling it out on the 15th of May, and it was supposed to be rolled out in January 2021, but we had to roll it back because there was a misunderstanding on the comms and the implication of this new change. But I'm happy to unpack it maybe later tonight because I'm on the go. And
okay, perfect. I would love that. Yeah. Thank you. So we'll do that in the afternoon, the other time zone, which you can see again by clicking on the title of the room. It's about 8 hours from right now is when that room starts, and it's tech news around the world, but has more of an American audience because the Americans are sleeping during this session primarily, and the American time zone things get a little more wild. For those who join both, you know exactly what I mean. It gets downright rowdy at times. But it's a lot.
Friday was crazy. I remember Tyler with Greg.
Yes, we've got some very rambunctious folks in that time zone. But I want to, now that we've covered the political topics of the day, we can get into the crypto topics of the day. And the hot one on my stack is eBay and NFTs. Did someone else notice that one? This one seems to be, I imagine it will have its own rooms later today in Clubhouse, where eBay now says it will allow NFTs to be sold on the eBay platform and will add new capabilities for blockchain-driven collectibles in coming months. The online sales platform eBay is now permitting the sale of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, for digital collectibles. Users can bid on NFTs as they would for a physical item. All payments will be made in US dollars, unlike other prominent NFT platforms, which usually accept Ether for NFT payments. Many of the NFTs currently available for sale on eBay appear to be on the WAX blockchain, with sellers stipulating that buyers create a Wax wallet in order to receive their NFT because it's a digital good and you need to somehow receive it. And that's why you need the Wax wallet to actually receive the digital good. The move to allow NFT sales comes a week after the eBay's CEO told CNBC that the company was looking at ways to incorporate NFTs on its platform. So just a week later, sure enough, here it is. It also appears to be part of a larger plan. In the coming months, eBay will add new capabilities to bring blockchain-driven collectibles to eBay, says the eBay's North America's general manager, Jordan Switnam. So what do we make of eBay getting into the NFT space? The one notable point, I think that's not necessarily a good sign for the very small niche NFT marketplaces that had been kind of handling these NFT transactions to date, now that there's a big player in town. And open to points for folks who, and Ame, no doubt, might have a point on this. What do you think of eBay getting into NFTs, Ame?
Hey there, Tyler. Thank you for acknowledging. That's actually, I think that's a few days old of an article, but at the end of the day, isn't eBay also owned by PayPal? Aren't they part of one and the same?
No. eBay divested in PayPal. eBay had bought PayPal and then divested that.
Well, there is something very interesting that's a connection to eBay relating to the NFTs is the amount of exposure that eBay will get as well in other parts of the world, because eBay's acquired Marktplaats in Netherlands and they actually own the auction the platform here. They actually came in and they actually acquired it a few years ago. So eBay has been also silently picking up those other auction sites, where those marketplace sites. So it'd be very interesting to see how they're going to sort of bring that forward. The one thing that I was going to actually bring up in news related to Taproot, which is Edward Snowden commented on how He doesn't know if the Taproot is going to solve the privacy problem, the privacy issue with Bitcoin. And I would love to defer that to Ben or Donna. I don't know if Donna's on stage, but Ben is, because Taproot is the upgrade to Bitcoin. And they're saying it's going to fix the privacy, but Edward Snowden's got a question mark on that. So I would like to kind of see from a privacy standpoint, because you were talking about what's up and sort of the privacy and signal encryption. I'm just interested to see what perspective Ben may have on that, if he's in the audience. I'm not sure if he is.
Hey, Emmy, I'm just out of the shower, so able to contribute briefly. So my general principle with these things is that I haven't looked in detail at Taproot yet because it hasn't yet quite been adopted. And if I look at everything that might be adopted in detail, I'll run out of time. So the first caveat is I haven't looked at the Taproot protocol in detail yet. So I can't really say. But my second point is that I'm not overall concerned with privacy on Bitcoin as it stands. I'd be interested to hear what people's concerns are as it stands, and I'll certainly report back about Taproot when it gets, as soon as it gets adopted. Thanks, which Ben. Might be in 2 weeks, it might be in 6 weeks. Then
Thank you.
I'll look at it in detail. Yeah,
appreciate it.
Cool. There's another. I mean, if somebody has other crypto news, Ben or May, and just for audience context, I mentioned May does rooms, including yesterday, my time zone, anyways. Which are have a specific aim of helping more ladies dive into the space, which there is a notable need for. And that's what a fantastic effort you're taking on there. And that's where we get back to the earlier point where we were debating in a very friendly way with Cheryl and Jennifer, that in those rooms where she's doing these 2-hour deep dives with women getting their heads around blockchain and crypto, she's spent an incredible number of hours understanding what trips people up and where the confusions are and how to help people get their minds around some of these issues. And I loved your cake metaphor of the walnuts in the cake allergies, and how you could use an NFT for a cake seller to track back, who's responsible for where these almonds.
These are the type of real life. These are the real life examples of use cases that will come to light in the decentralized ledger tech blockchain, which in essence, the first use case was the Byzantine problem that was solved by Bitcoin back in 2009, January. So at the end of the day, I would probably I'd probably say, hey, do your own research, DYOR, because a lot of the times what I do is TLDR, which is too long to read. So I've read the Bitcoin standard, I've read the white paper, I've done a summary of the Bitcoin standard, so I've made my own cliff notes. I think there's a huge element of really understanding what drove this whole industry to come forward. And Bitcoin's like the granddaddy, and it just happens to be considered a cryptocurrency. But I love what Ben says as well. We go deep dive into it in the Bitcoin rooms, but the reality of the decentralized ledger tech space is that it is and has started with solving a cryptographic, algorithmic, mathematical equation problem. And that was Bitcoin, the Byzantine problem, right? The Byzantine generals problem. It's super heavy, which is why I try to keep it light and airy about like recipes, wedding cakes, things like that, because it's relatable, and those use cases are in fact use cases that can pop onto the blockchain decentralized ledger space.
I watched you do something truly masterful, which was, and I have others in the room, we were DMing how impressive it was. You looked at the bio of one of the people in the room with you on stage, and she was a cake maker. And you said, so you make cakes. Okay, so let's put it in this context. Imagine you make a cake, somehow walnuts get in it, and the purchaser is allergic to walnuts. But if you sold the cake on an NFT, and you could, it was like you did it in such.
I pulled an Elon Musk for sure.
To add to that,
Elon
the
Musk
way that
sure.
works is auditing that to the real world. That's where the difficulty to come in is because the NFT is still just a digital token, right? So you have to connect that to real world, and that's where when people are saying, and I'm just pointing out additional on top of what you're saying, it's where the data is in and out. Like I met a hemp water manufacturer this weekend, who's explaining to me that what they do is they're getting their hemp water tested, and then that when they confirm that testing, the water goes into those bottles, and they all get QR codes, and they're sealed, and so that when that shows up somewhere else, and it's still sealed with that QR code, you can say, okay, that has that hemp that hemp level that they tested. But like a cake, walnuts in a cake are a great analogy, but they're not like it's like supply chain. Is it a closed Bitcoin who has access to it? Where did that get in from the real tangible item?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
real
I've got a
life.
couple of.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question. One
John,
final question.
let me just add to Jennifer's point really quickly. It's really important that you're talking. I think you're alluding to the Oracle problem there, Jennifer, which is worth looking up. How the blockchains connect to the real world.
Oracles and parachains, don't forget them. Moonbeam and Polkadot are actually doing that. We're creating oracles, which is Chainlink, parachains, which are Moonbeam, sitting on the Polkadot ecosystem.
Wait. So I'm going to bring it back to Earthy. So I dealt with this stuff at Accenture, right? So I dealt with supply chain management. How, Ben, we talked about it. Like you could put an RFID tag on certain items. That might be one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's people manually entering at each point along the supply chain. They still have to enter it or scan it or somehow.
Totally agree with that.
And digital file, right? It's not like you're going to go to somewhere and go, how did walnuts end up in a cake? That's not.
Actually, no, Jennifer. I'm sorry. You know what? You denigrate my experience.
I'm saying your example
say these things on a live
I'm
audience.
just showing the real world examples there, Amy.
But the real world example, Jennifer, is the fact that walnuts are part of a supply chain. They have to be farmed and they have to be bought into the ecosystem.
How did they end up on the cake? But how did they end up in the
cake? Because they have to be purchased.
Hold on. You guys have both got really amazing stories. Amy is doing a fantastic work of like skilling up people from like nothing to knowing a load of stuff. And Jennifer, like we know that you know your stuff in the corporate context. So like, let's celebrate each other. And like, I know I've heard you guys riff before, but let's cap it, huh?
Yeah.
Tyler.
Dave, I have one question if you guys can just answer it.
Go ahead, Akil.
Yeah. What are the privacy concerns you were talking about? Because I've been trying to read online. They're incredibly technical. I don't understand them. Just explain that.
Akil, that's a deep dive room question. So hold that for
Akil, I'm happy to give you some information on that.
It's beyond the scope of this room. But I want to get into, there was another kind of fintech news around, kind of as a soft pivot from crypto to fintech, a company called Better.com, doing online mortgages, is going to do a SPAC listing. And this is a bit interesting because it signals the fact that these online mortgage services, no longer banks, are reaching a level of success where they're going public, in this case being a SPAC at a $7.7 billion valuation. And the deal includes $1.5 billion from a SoftBank-led investment. So digital mortgage lenders like Better will make its market debut by doing a SPAC valuing at $7.7 billion. On the digital mortgage lenders or online mortgage services is another way where, startups, for lack of a better word, are kind of starting to eat at the bread and butter of traditional banks who, these mortgages and mortgage lending was primarily the exclusive territory of large banks. And now we're seeing many startups, even in the Nordics, friends of mine who do Block out of Helsinki, and there's Swedish ones as well, are taking away one of the important assets of the banking, the big banks. And
you're right, Tyler. And it's a longer discussion, maybe now or another time, but the whole credit rating, right, is being disrupted.
Yeah,
but better and better credit rating.
I'm just pointing it out, and the reason that they're better at it is because they're coming at it, with data. I mean, it's essentially like Spotify with music. It's like they can bring so much data to these equations, and they can give you mortgages and approve you for a mortgage, sometimes in minutes. And the one that I know of in Sweden, they did a demo. They launched on stage at my event in front of 7,000 people, live audience, and they did the world's first real-time mortgage application where the user came up on stage, applied for a mortgage, got approved in less than 60 seconds. For their mortgage, a real actual mortgage, live on stage, approved digitally using algorithms.
Was it a random person?
Yeah, random from the audience. Yeah, because we had like thousands of people in the audience, and the demo was truly mind blowing. It was this startup who's going to do algorithm-based mortgage approvals, and they said who's planning to apply for a mortgage in the next weeks. Okay, thousands of people in the audience, so no doubt somebody is. Okay, great, please come on up. please use the computer, type in your details, and we timed it, and it came out to about 60 seconds, which is what they were aiming for their marketing purposes, to say that you can apply and get approved for a mortgage in less than 60 seconds. That's my point is...
Game over for HSBC.
That's my point.
I mean, it's like...
Yeah, so this is something to be mindful of as a thesis data point in the future of fintech, and that's kind of my point on that. If there's other fintech points, headlines people want to raise, feel free to jump in before we move on to China. Now that I want to take advantage of the brilliant David and Kai on stage. Yes, Hassim.
Hey Tyler, how you doing?
Good. Oh, sorry, I thought that was Hassim. Carlos, go ahead, Carlos. What's up?
Yeah. How you doing? No, good. While I was listening, I was reading to this report that came up yesterday from Swift and Accenture. That yesterday they published a report on central bank digital currencies. It's very interesting. When they talk, they're talking about that more than half of the world central banks have actively considering the introduction of the digital currency. So for people interested, it should be a good read for guys that want to know the development on the EC's current efforts to.
It's the whole world simultaneously is shifting, and a lot of the central banks, no doubt, around the world are. As the UK bank said recently, they need to. It's clear they have ambitions in this regard because they're telling UK folks to be very careful about their crypto investments, and Singapore did the same, and then who's come? Egypt had the same. Simultaneously, there's Turkey. Everybody, all these central banks are now strategizing what to do. Interestingly, Sweden was really one of the first to announce this years ago, and they've been very slow and steady in their approach, and China's going headstrong, and each day now we have a headline about how the new Chinese digital currency is being implemented. Yesterday we did a deep dive thanks to David on stage, who helped us because he deals with this personally and professionally on a very intimate basis. Precisely how the central bank in China and the People's Bank of China is using now Alipay as a one of the kind of tools by which they plan to drive the adoption for this. So I thank you for that, Carlos. It is and one of those, like the pipeline, an ongoing story. But in the case of the central bank digital currencies, this story is going to be a daily developing story for the next few years, I think. So, but we're going to watch the play-by-play, and there will be interesting moments and revelations along the way. There already have been. But speaking of China, I want to turn it to David. You mentioned there's something happening around Taiwan.
Yeah, so as everyone's well aware, this year Taiwan has really come to the forefront in its involvement in semiconductor chip manufacturing. But I guess the interesting thing is because Taiwan has been relatively unscathed in this entire COVID epidemic. However, they've sounded the alarm yesterday, and as a result, the Taiwan Stock Exchange has taken big dives 2 days in a row, and today it had the largest fall intraday slump since 1969, 8.6% in a day. And so the current price now, or the current index, has gone down nearly 10% since its April highs. So I think this is obviously a story in development to see if Taiwan can turn things around, or we're going to start seeing sort of even more anxious global supply chains being sort of halted. And Taiwan's actually facing a number of problems. So its whole COVID alert was raised by the largest Taiwanese domestic airlines cargo department, their cargo pilots. And then on top of that, they also are facing unprecedented water shortage. And water is actually one of the most important resources that they need in semiconductor the manufacturing process. Yeah. So definitely keeping an eye out for this.
Thank you for this, David. And you did a really fantastic deep dive in the room that you and Justin were doing a few hours ago, which we were talking about yesterday. And thanks again to you for helping us navigate this very interesting topic of the big data announcement around the Chinese census data around the birth rate. And we talked about it for 30 minutes or an hour here, and you did a few hours again just a few hours ago with Justin. who I highly encourage people follow, David and Justin. They have fantastic political conversations of all different kinds. Unfortunately, Justin's not here at the moment, but he normally joins us in the other time zone about 7 hours from now. And couldn't be bigger fans of the two of you, keeping the discourse on Clubhouse very high level. And your insights into what's going on in China, as you being on the ground in Beijing, are priceless. Kai as well adds a fantastic cultural context, being from China originally himself, but living in the UK, and we get kind of every angle on this, which is such a beautiful aspect of what we try to represent here at Tech News Around the World. I wanted to ask you though, what came out of? Was there more insights that came out of the deep dive you did today on the Chinese population sort of declining amongst the child birth rate? I remember in the recap there was a couple of interesting points made that I wasn't so aware of, which is, if China is starting to encourage women to have more children again, which apparently they are, that means there's less women in the workforce, at least temporarily, because the employers now perceive women of childbearing age as a bit of a liability, because the government's telling those women to have children, and hence they won't be as attractive as employees. And that's just one of other points that I think you guys raised in your deep dive today. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But I think the there is some optimism. I'm usually the one to be very optimistic sounding, I guess. Which is the more significant gender imbalance ratio that we saw with China's one-child policy, especially with this Chinese cultural inclination of preference for sons, has been corrected over the past 10 years, which is great news. So it was 111.3 women to 100 men 10 years ago. That number has now come down to 105 women for every 100 men. So while we're losing women in the workforce, and the number is actually the current imbalance in terms of men and women is about 30 million, right? And while we're losing women in additional to that 30 million to pregnancy and childbearing, the positive news is that the imbalance is slowly being recorrected to a much more normalized level. So I think there is optimism for the future. In terms of China. And then the other takeaway to remember is China had a very disruptive cultural revolution from the 60s forward to the 70s. So this retiring elderly population, while making it China sort of top heavy, they are relatively less productive in terms of economic output versus this younger generation, because they came from a period in China where most of their education was disrupted by events like the Cultural Revolution. So while we're retiring them, it might not be as hurtful as most data in other countries of relative elderly population would suggest.
Yeah, one other interesting headline related to China is TikTok is now testing a tool with a group of companies to help large companies recruit employees using TikTok, where users can post video resumes in response to job listings. And the question, of course, is will people be dancing as part of their video resumes? That will be a very interesting new media mashup indeed.
Tyler, do you remember Alexei Vayner?
No.
Okay, he's I think 15 years ago he sort of made the headlines for submitting the worst ever video resume. If anyone's interested, he has like a Wikipedia page on him. So hopefully it doesn't become that.
Yeah.
If dancing is a criteria, I'm unemployed for life.
Well, I love to comment on this because I'm just suddenly I'm extremely encouraged by this.
As a good dancer, Kai. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I want to correct that. Actually, dancing is not that required, but singing, the karaoke skill, is absolutely must-have if you want to do business in China.
That is a great point.
I have tried my very best to actually improve and perfect.
This is actually culturally an interesting point for people who have not done business, and it's not just China, it's Japan as well to a degree, which is the part of the ritual of doing business is spending a little time in the karaoke room and getting to know each other on a personal level. And so there is that, believe it or not. I mean, this sounds a bit humorous to people who haven't experienced it, but it's legitimate. This is part of the deal making and the kind of the profession.
Actually, there's a word for it in Japan.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not just karaoke. Basically, it's drinking party. It's called nominication.
Yeah. Like
nomo means drink.
To drink. Yeah.
Communication. So they combine both. Nominication. They call it.
Drink and communication. Nomication.
Tyler.
Yes.
This is Lakeisha. We would have offsites pre-COVID back in the day at my other institution that, maybe it would take us 2.5 hours to get there. And we would take 2 vans of colleagues. And as soon as we loaded into the van, they were handing out karaoke song sheets. Mm-hmm. And we would sing at, starting at 7 a.m. on a Saturday when we would head out for 2.5 hours. And you're right. It's so much a part of the culture. In Thailand, I was judging a startup competition a few weeks ago in Manila.
Yeah.
Virtually.
Yeah.
And after the pitch competition, we were singing karaoke for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And some people take it very seriously, once you get over that first song. And then, there are people that are just waiting for their song to come on because they've been rehearsing. So I love it. It's something that I've really grown to really appreciate.
Yeah.
I think part of it is our culture is so stoic and hierarchical.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only way to let that all down is at night in the karaoke rooms.
Yep.
And then if you understand the lyrics, they are the sappiest ballads that you can possibly ever imagine that are being sung.
Yeah, it's a ritual of forced embarrassment and debasement, and it's almost like
which is genius in a way.
It is genius,
because
but
what it does is it makes you humble and at the right.
Yeah. But it also it forces you to in the same thing that cults do, where they force you to hand over incriminating evidence that they could use against you later if you do something wrong. So
that's true too.
Yeah, it's a more subtle version of that. Yeah,
and most of my the deals, like the actual conversation would start at 11 o'clock after you have
late
possibly given away a lot of your cards.
Oh, it's going out. It goes late into
on it.
Yeah, it goes all night. And to Lakeisha's point, in Thailand, it's also demonstrates a lot of the higher end of business in Thailand is still a lot of the Chinese and Japanese. China and Japan have played a very significant roles in the business realms of Thailand and still do to this day in many ways. And that's why, but that culture has been absorbed here as well. I want to turn it to GreenTech.
Tyler, quick. Just on that quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think with it being TikTok, it's more about a generational play in terms of reaching an audience for recruitment?
Gareth, for sure it is. For no doubt. Thank you for raising the point. You get a ding for that. It's no doubt, and the younger generations are not accustomed to using traditional browser-based website recruitment platforms like Monster.com and whatnot. They are used to creating content on their phones, and there is not yet a really good recruitment iPhone app, right? So it turns out that why not go where the users already are, right? Which is TikTok. And so I think it's a brilliant move on TikTok's part to get into a whole new massive monetizable part of the internet that these legacy players have been slow to move into. Yeah, it's a great point. So I want to go into GreenTech because we have Dan on stage. I know he's got an event coming up that he wants to touch on, and he also has often great headlines to share. But let's first, Sarah, you sent a really cool a clean energy headline. Go ahead and share that one. Sarah, Sarah going once. Are you there, Sarah? Did she jump off stage? Is that right? Dan, did you have a headline you want to share?
Well, it's more of a climate public service announcement,
okay.
I guess.
The sky is falling.
Well, no, it's about a particular person that many people might have heard of, and a relative of mine asked me about him today, and I realized he has a book out, and it gets a high review in Amazon, and it's total bullshit. So anyway, his name is Bjorn Lomborg, Bjorn. He's from Denmark. He's a political scientist who claims he knows a lot about climate, and he was originally a climate denier, but that became untenable, obviously. So he's now more of a climate apologist, I guess. He claims that climate alarmism is very damaging, expensive, and hurts people. And he wrote a book called False Alarm, which claims that the cost of mitigating climate change, like switching to renewables, is way too expensive, and the damage from climate change won't really be as much as everybody says. So he does some optimization in his book and comes up with the figure that the optimal warming that we should target is 3.75 degrees Celsius. And anybody who knows about climate change knows that is absolutely insane. That's all I have to say about that. So if anyone's curious and wants to know more, if they've read the problem with him, he's a very good speaker. He's given TED Talks, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but it's all there's a whole book called the Lomborg Deception, where scientists basically, discredited everything he said. When you have a whole book written about how wrong you are, you're doing something, I guess. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that out because his name came up today. We talked about it in our club, and he's very dangerous because he comes off as credible when he's really absolutely not. And so I just wanted to say that because I think that some people here might run into him and see his book and be very, very careful about it. It's total bullshit, I guess.
Is there any chance that he'll join Clubhouse and do a big Rumble room?
I don't know. He goes around giving talks and things.
Well,
so
maybe we could lure him. Maybe we could lure him into Clubhouse with the false pretense that everyone's excited to hear about his, what he has to say.
Yeah, that's true. I relish that. I debated someone like him once before, and he didn't realize I was ready for him. So, anyway, that was one thing. I'll just quickly say two other things. Is we had a room today with John Cook, who does skepticalscience.com. And speaking of deniers, if you ever are wondering, you hear someone denied climate for some reason, they gave you something that sounded like it made sense. Oh, it's the sun, or the climate always changes, or something like that. Skepticalscience.com will list every single one of those false arguments and then give you the science about what the real answer is. So that's fantastic. And then we also had Ben Newell, who I didn't realize when we were talking to him. He's the guy who helped present the paper a long time ago that said 97% of scientists agree that global warming has happened. Almost everyone's heard that. One of the most successful science communication efforts about climate change. So, and he was behind that. So we had a great discussion. And the one you were mentioning that I'm excited about on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. California time is a discussion with Kevin Anderson, climate scientist Kevin Anderson, who's one of my favorite climate scientists for the last 10 years. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He tells it like it is. And it's going to be a very interesting talk. I spent an hour on the phone with him today. It's going to be a great discussion then. So anyway, that's
Dan,
that's
I'm curious
right
how much traction or how much interest you get from the broader Clubhouse community on these amazing speakers that you bring in. I'm just curious in terms of timing, in terms of et cetera, because some of the people I see, like you see people coming in and they're getting like 3,000 people listening to them. They're wonderful insights. And when you look at TED Talks, the entire TED stage on the main stage is about 2,000, 1,500 people in the live thing, right? So I'm just curious, are you getting?
So we get about first of all, they are fantastic talks, and they're ethereal, right? They happen then and then they're gone. And we get about 100 people total, and maybe 50, 60 people max. So it's like a fifth or sixth of what we're getting here on Tech News. I guess,
we need to help
like
you with that. No, it's good.
I would like to help. We do what we know to do. We go on Twitter. We do all that kind of stuff to get the word out. But there's less. There's less interest in the subject. There needs to be more, of course. And I certainly appreciate advice. Hey, I'll bring up one interesting thing. Kind of related. I was talking today with the staff member of a congressman we're trying to get on the show. They mentioned all the security concerns around Clubhouse, like Chinese servers and things like that. And so I don't know if you guys have dealt with that, but that's one of the impediments of getting some people on the app here. It looks like we're going to try to work it out, but I just thought that was interesting that you have to be, if you're a congressman, you have to be very, very careful about security concerns.
This is Shaheen. How do you battle folks like Lomborg? Because
first of all,
sound very good.
The scientists come out and debunk him whenever he raises his head. But the problem is he's successful. He sounds so smooth and he had this TED talk, which believe me, I let the head of TED how bad that was. But so he seeks out places that are legitimate places to give his talk, so that they essentially lend their legitimacy to him, even though what he's saying is BS. But it sounds really smooth. You have to kind of know what you're doing to know where he's lying to you. All the climate scientists do, but they're not there on stage with him. So it's that's why I'm saying he's very dangerous. His work will certainly has slowed down climate response to some degree, and I'm sure the lives of many, many thousands of people are going to many thousands of people are going to die just because of his efforts alone to slow down response to climate change. And it's really weird why he's even doing it, because he knows better.
I think it's a giant challenge that in the interest of hearing all sides, you end up endorsing the absolute mistruth.
Say again?
I think it's a big challenge that in the interest of hearing all sides, which is probably why TED gave him an audience, you end up endorsing the wrong thing, because TED also.
Well, he's smooth. He's I've heard him speak. He's very smooth the way he does it, and he pretends to be an environmentalist, right?
Then that's entertainment.
His first book was called The Skeptical Environmentalist.
Yeah, I want to see.
I just have one question out of curiosity. How is it that different people are able to use the same kind of data and prove it, kind of in their own ways, disprove climate change? Because climate change is science, right?
Yes, Akil. Again, that's a great. You are the king of starting deep dive conversations. That's a great title for a room, actually. But we will be here for an hour.
Kill the room generator bot.
Yes.
Kill the room generator bot.
Please open some green rooms then.
But that is a great topic. How do we
Climate
get
chat club?
Yes. But Akil, I'm noticing a pattern here. You ask very innocent questions that require hours of conversation.
I am a kid after all.
Yeah,
come listen. By the way, come listen to Kevin Anderson, because that's very. Again, he doesn't sugarcoat it. You're going to hear some very direct stuff from a guy who's been doing this for a long time, and 10 years ago said, this 2-degree stuff is bullshit because we're not doing. You could do it, but nothing that's happening in government or the IPCC is actually really doing it. And he was right? So if you want to hear the real side of things, come over and listen. And but our little small group will grow, and we'll get the word out, I guess.
I'm excited. I'll be there.
And if you want to just reach out to me directly on my bio has an email address. You can write to me and we can talk about stuff offline or something.
Thanks, Dan. Sarah, are you back? You had this clean energy DM.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I was away earlier, but it's admittedly a long report and haven't read everything yet. It's a report that was recently.
Hold on, Sarah. Your connection is not yet good enough to jump in, so we'll circle back to you on this point.
Hey, Tyler, I have a quick. Sorry, I just have a quick news bit here. Or should I wait?
Yeah,
Sarah, are you back? Your connection wasn't great. Have you got a good connection now? Do you want to go ahead? Hello, Sarah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but you sound like a robot.
Hello?
You sound like a 1980s robot, which is cool but frustrating. So we'll circle back to you. Azlek, what was your point, real quick?
No, it's a news bit that I've been waiting for. Actually, it's the gig economy writers in Spain must become staffed within 90 days under new rules.
Ooh.
And another really interesting part that I thought was that they have a requirement that all these gig economy need to share the algorithms, how the work is going to be shared.
That ain't going to work. That's an existential threat. I don't think Uber will ever do that. They're not going to share their algorithms for how they allocate, which drivers get flagged. They are not. I don't think they're going to do that. That's really interesting. That might force them to leave the country. In fact,
yeah. Yeah, so but this is for Spain, but I've been looking for, to be honest, the gig economy has had this problem going on for a long time.
But here,
so Spain is moving first.
But
I also see some stuff. Yeah.
Why would the government give a shit about the actual algorithm? Does the government plan to replicate it and build their own competitor?
Right. This is from Reuters. No, this is from Reuters, and what they're saying is, let's see here. Yeah, okay. So the government also approved new rules obliging companies to explain to their staff how their workload sharing algorithms work. So the staff needs to know it, not the government.
Gotcha. Okay. But it also says they have to explain it, not fully reveal it. Okay, yeah. Well, they'll make a nice little pie chart, and they'll explain it with cute little unicorn diagrams and whatever. Thank you for that, though. That's interesting. I had not seen that one about Spain going on that angle as well. But Mabwana, you had an article about Uber in Africa.
Yeah, it's actually not like super current. It's about a week or two old, but I've been getting pinged about it quite a bit throughout the last week.
Yeah.
So Uber just launched an electric motorcycle for Uber Eats in Nairobi, in Kenya. So that's like a interesting. I think it's the first in the world. I'm not sure if someone can confirm if there's the option to do that. But essentially, what happens in the app is you actually get the option to pick the sustainability option, and it costs the drivers 45% less to transport it, because fuel is a big expense for these drivers. So that's something that's very interesting. I think the trend is also fascinating because we're seeing more and more supply chain startups also incorporate the green aspects, sustainability aspect with solar charging, etc. Also, as a kind of FYI, Kenya has something like 70% of its energy generated from renewable sources, geothermal and solar and wind. So Kenya could be it always has been for a while now, but is still leading in this sort of Africa clean tech wave. And it's great to see Uber bring that. That means lots of consumers will have that option to basically pick a sustainability option as well. So just wanted to bring that up as an interesting headline.
Yeah, I love seeing how Uber adapts to each market it goes into. Like, for example, in Grab in Southeast Asia, it's really about the motorbike drivers, doing all the deliveries and even taxis, and how the deliveries, in America, it's still very cars, even though I don't know that it needs to be. Some cities are much better serviced by motorcycles and even tuk-tuks, as we have in Thailand, and all the different transportation options in each country and how they are specific in each market. It's really interesting to see how the models evolve.
I believe was the first to launch cash payment options in Nairobi, Kenya as well.
Oh wow!
And I remember when they entered Kenya, they were looking for a local GM specifically to help bring that on board, and I think they were able to take that feedback and launch that when all the other cities they had some sort of electronic payment option. So cash was first launched in Kenya. One thing I also wanted to add to the sort of
but that was precisely because the digitalization of payments really hadn't been widely adopted there yet, right? So they sort of
it was actually that they couldn't get the M-Pesa integrated.
Right.
Mobile money is also big in Kenya.
Right.
And actually, I remember this because Safaricom, the company that kind of runs M-Pesa in Kenya, had no API for Uber to integrate.
Makes sense.
So these are some of the opportunities that a lot of fintechs have been doing in Africa.
Right.
There was no API to plug in mobile money into Uber, and so Uber said, "F it, we'll just use cash."
Right.
And then suddenly, Safaricom, which is like worth maybe $3 or $4 billion as a telco, we're like, oh my God, this Uber is worth like, a lot of money, and it's, well adopted. And so I think now you can do it, but it's not like as smooth as obviously paying by credit card and other things. But I was going to add one important element to the GreenTech aspects in Africa. There has been a lot of investment in the last 10 years in off-grid energy, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. One of the most challenging aspects of clean tech adoption in Africa is how do you get the lowest economic of the pyramid folks onto green energy. Typically like one panel on a roof, one light, and maybe charging a phone. There have been a number of startups that have launched this, backed by even Tesla and others like Off-Grid, Mcopa. And a lot of them actually haven't done super well financially. But the trend now is to back more income-producing energy endeavors, right? So Uber Eats, for instance, makes a lot of sense because the drivers are making money. Whilst if you go to a village in the middle of Africa and just give them an off-grid system, you don't even know if they're earning income to be able to pay it off. So you can actually put them in a debt trap. So I think we're seeing a shift now in Africa where you're going to see more and more clean tech going into income-producing, gig economy meets clean tech to get you onto to get Africans onto the a more sustainable path. So we're seeing a lot of these waves: supply chain, Uber. And others as well. Thanks. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, huge opportunity in making those changes, no doubt. Which is why we're doing
Tyler.
that. But that just to put a bow on that thought, beautiful thought, Mabwana, is that's a big part of why we want to do this. African investors and startups and hear the pitches of what's going on there, to see what kind of solutions are on the horizon over there, and what they feel like, and get a better sense of what's going on the ground there. And that's the May 27th event, and hopefully we'll help get some startups funded so they can make those solutions become realities. Sorry, who jumped in there at the end? Sorry, I cut you off.
It was me.
Hey, Jay. Yeah. Speaking of Grab, yeah.
Well, not related to Grab, but definitely related to ride hailing. I posted this on Twitter that Waymo and Cruise are now looking for permits to charge for autonomous rides.
Right, great share.
So which is related, right?
Yeah. So this is interesting because it challenges. There's a bit of a debate around when autonomous is really going to happen, right? And the fact that Cruise and Waymo are now putting in applications to do fully autonomous vehicle taxis is an indication that it's not that far away. And also the other stronger evidence perhaps is that the fact that Beijing reportedly has fully autonomous taxis live in Beijing, which went live like 48 hours ago. So that might have been what lit those headlines could have been what lit the fire under the asses of Waymo and Cruise to make these applications so that they are not perceived as falling behind by investors and whatnot. So interesting to see what the timeline will be from application to actually live autonomous taxis on the roads, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think
time will tell. We'll be watching it closely. But it seems to me that it's closer than many people debate here in this room. But we'll see. I mean, let's just be the when the rubber hits the road, that's when we'll know. And we can debate it all day long, but it'll happen when it happens. Other headlines. So thank you for that, Jay.
Tyler?
Yes.
I'm sorry for all of the technical issues.
No problem.
Just wanted
you're back.
Quickly
you sound great, Sarah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. If I cut out again, please just jump over me.
Okay.
But I was just raising this very interesting report from the International Energy Agency. It's just talking about how green energy production and the really rapid shift towards green energy and renewable energy is going to actually cause potentially a lot of issues with minerals and rare earth minerals specifically. I know we've been talking a lot either in Clubhouse or the tech space about semiconductors, and David mentioned water as a resource for semiconductor production, but just some highlights from this report, which is pretty long. Apparently an EV uses 6 times as many mineral resources as a fossil fuel car. It also says an offshore wind plant requires 9 times as many mineral resources as a comparable gas power plant. And obviously lithium is mentioned as kind of like the new white gold used in EV batteries, which is expected to multiply in demand 70 times in the next few decades. And the problem is that there's a lot of supply chain issues again. And for example, 70% of the world's cobalt production apparently comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I think, they apparently outlined 6 areas of action to avoid shortages and issues, but it seems like there's a lot of cooperation or kind of the same, action items we would see in all of the other issues we're facing right now, but just going to increase in need. So it's kind of fascinating. I'm sure there's a lot to dig in, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Can I give a little color on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, it's true. We're going to need like 30 times more stuff, because it's a new industry scaling up, and we're going to need batteries for cars and energy storage. Lithium is a very common material. It's element. It's in the oceans essentially in unlimited quantity. I think it's 230 billion tons is estimated, where the total world supply in the ground where we're mining it's about 100 million tons. But it's very dilute. It's like 1 or 2 parts. That's 1 or 2 parts per million or something like that. And so it takes a lot of effort to get it. But once we figure that out, there'll be a lot of it. And it's just like anything else, any new industry. Like when we scaled up cars 100 so years ago, we had to figure out where the oil was, and we figured it out. So we'll figure it out too. But that doesn't mean there won't be issues. They are designing cobalt out of batteries because, not so much because you can't find it, but because where they do find it, there's lots of human rights problems. So they're just trying to get away from that altogether. And nickel will be an issue, but it's pretty straightforward how to do it. But, it's going to be a challenge, but one that there'll be a lot of money behind it. So they'll figure out how to do it. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Also wanted to kind of chime in for Dan here a little bit with the DRC aspect. Yeah, cobalt is, plentiful there, but DRC is always having issues. It's kind of one of the basket cases of the conflicts in Africa. But I'm actually curious to, I'm looking for, this is an investment category for my fund, using blockchain to track the source of these rare earth minerals like cobalt and others, and even diamonds. There was a headline you brought up, Dan, a while back about the rise of lab-grown or lab-produced diamonds, and what that might do to a country like Botswana, which, by the way, is the opposite to DRC. Botswana is one of the most well-run and least corrupt countries in Africa, but 95% of its GDP, foreign earnings, comes from diamonds. And what happens when if lab-produced diamonds become much more competitive? I think the only way they can keep up is if they can prove that through maybe blockchain or some tracking that the diamonds have been tracked and produced without labor issues like child labor, etc.
Yeah.
I saw that, I can't remember the exact date, but I saw that Pandora is going to phase out diamonds and only have lab grown. I can't remember the exact date, but
that was right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that was like 2 days ago. Sarah's totally right.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Bringing up Kuram onto the stage here, and for the other folks who have hands raised, make sure you put some bio info, because without any bios, we have no context about. So and it's not just for this room. You'll have a very hard time joining any stage without any bio info. That's just an update for everybody in the room, but maybe more so for as we get many more new users into Clubhouse, which is great. A lot of new Android users. Be very mindful that nearly every room moderator is going to require some kind of bio information to avoid people jumping up and making obscene comments, etc. Chetna, did you send me a DM yesterday? I get quite a few, but did you send one you want to share?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just an article I came across on the Wall Street Journal, which talks about Google doubling the size of their AI ethics team over the next few years, really in an attempt to try and avoid some of the discrimination that's coming out from that. And I think that there must have been, I think they were discredited a while back because some reports were hidden.
Well, no, this is a much bigger issue. They had already started to build a team, and then started laying off some of the team due to some internal heatedness. And then the boss of that team now just went over to Apple. And now they're apparently starting over again and plan to do it bigger and better, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. But it's an interesting update on the Google AI ethics team issue, which a lot of people are watching very closely because AI does dance very directly on a lot of ethical issues, and they definitely need a team to deal with that. And hopefully they don't get wrapped up in the craziness that they found themselves in, these very heated exchanges with their initial team members. And let's wish them luck on the second time around. I wanted to bring up Nicholas. Thank you for this, Chetna. It is an important issue that we got to keep our eye on. And glad to see that Google is, gonna not giving up on the issue completely and still focused on it. Nicholas, on the VR front, there was, as you well know, the HTC VR and Victoria, right above you. Victoria did a room yesterday that was synchronized to the HTC ViveCon event, which I joined a little bit late, but the consensus was that it was very disappointing in terms of its revelations. And I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on what the VR community is talking about today as a result of that event.
Tyler, can I make a quick comment on Sarah before we actually move on to the next one? Just Sarah made a very valid point on this particular point in terms of the actual, it's going to be a lot more expensive in order to go towards any green energy and all that. I just want a very different angle. Right now, we are consuming about 2% of the total electricity generated around the world towards the blockchain. This is going to increase. This is going to go upwards. This is not going to go down anytime in the future. And that's where the key energy consumption is going to be. Yes, it's going to be towards the EVs, but at the same time, the whole financial system in the next couple of decades is going to be based on it. And we're going to be needing a lot more energy towards that front. So yeah, that's another angle.
Okay, thanks for that. So the Victoria, can you give a quick recap on the room from yesterday? And then I'd love to hear Nicholas's thoughts as well.
Yeah, so they have two new headsets, and they're 5K headsets, which are cool. One of them has both of them have foveated rendering. It's been a lot of hours since then. So I can't remember
It's been a VR decade since then. The action is fast and furious. I recall that they're clearly having more of an emphasis on enterprise, and that was even sort of revealed before the event even started, right? And I think what we realized from in this room is, having watched the recent headlines around VR, AR, MR, is that we realized recently that Facebook has had a long interest in purchasing in VR. They purchased Oculus, which is one of the main headsets companies. And it occurred to me personally, and maybe to a lot of other people, why is Facebook so damn interested in VR? As in part because Facebook is fundamentally, in some sense, an ad network, an ad platform, and so is Google. And Apple, as the next headline we're going to get into highlights, Apple is also starting to ramp up its ambitions to be an ad network and platform. And so it's not a coincidence that those three companies also are the potentially three leading players in the AR, VR space in some sense. And so Facebook is very interested in VR because of their ad network and VR being the future platform of apps and advertising. But Oculus is incredibly low priced at around $300 for the Quest 2, right? And they're able to make that such an attractive price because they bundle it with the ad network, and they know they're going to monetize that device. And so the same way that the Android manufacturers do, they can lower the price because they know they're going to make money from you from the device. So they bake that into the subsidized price of the handsets. Apple, on the other hand, traditionally doesn't do that. That's why Apple devices often cost a bit more. But notably, HTC doesn't have an ad network, and that's why the HTC devices are not going to be competing for the consumer VR space. They're going to have to focus on the enterprise VR space, which is why their event yesterday was focused around topics around the medical use of VR and maybe the policing use of VR. And there are benefits to focusing on the enterprise side of VR because there's less data security issues if you're not tied to ad networks and things of that, and consumer data, and staying away from the consumer side of it, focusing on the enterprise side of it, which is, it seems to be a smart strategy for HTC to just concede the whole consumer side of VR to Facebook and Google and Apple and focus on the enterprise side, which it seems like what they're doing. Yeah.
I can give a small summary on the thing if you or Victoria want.
Yes, since then I've actually spent the entire day in Blender and WebXR, so my brain is just thinking about the 3D objects and 3D space.
Yeah, no worries.
So yes, please do the thing. Thank you.
Yeah, like Victoria said, they were both 5K, both supporting foveated rendering, both bumping up to 120 for the viewing angle. Which is really good for people who don't like those sort of restricted viewing that you get on the Oculus, which is 100 degrees. Interestingly, the Pro version, if I remember rightly, comes with a default of 120 hertz refresh rate, which anyone who's tried VR, the refresh rate is super important. The Enterprise version, which the name I can't remember off the top of the head, the Vive Focus 3, maxes out at 90. Now, I don't know if that's going to be changed later on in a software update, much like Oculus has done, but it's really strange that the Enterprise version has that limitation when the Pro doesn't. I mean, for gaming and whatnot, the focus seemed to be on the fact that the new Pro is more comfortable, more balanced, lots of interchangeable parts, an increase on... they're moving over to the same platform as the Oculus, which is the XR2 from Qualcomm, I believe, which is really strange because their big surprise was, hey, we're catching up to the Quest, which is a really strange thing to try and sort of big up. What they were really pushing the enterprise factor of it. They came out of the gate straight away saying, sort of focusing on that. Almost 60 to 70% of it was talking about military applications, engineering applications, services applications. There was a section on firefighters and medical. They highlighted that for at least the focus, all of the rendering that's done, all of the sort of the video capture and the rendering of the environment is done on device and encrypted. And they were really sort of keen to point out that none of the data about, none of the raw data about the environment is sent back to their servers. But of course, that doesn't mean that metadata about usage in the environment isn't sent back to the servers. And in fact, one of the things that they displayed was the ability to have multiple headsets being used by a group of people for training, for instance, and then one person can use an accompanying app to direct the focus and highlight certain aspects in the view, and you can actually control what each person is seeing. So all of that is going back to their servers. So all of that, the data about how you use it and whatnot, will likely go back to the HTC servers or wherever the servers are based. And I'm curious about if, like, what I said this to you yesterday, Tyler, and at some point it'd be great if we can get somebody to answer this. Is like, are they going to face any difficulties in the enterprise world, given the fact that I believe they're based in Taiwan?
Yeah.
But it was very focused on enterprise. There was a tiny section of about 5 or 6 minutes focused on, and then it actually went back into enterprise again. So they're kind of drawing a line in the sand here, in my mind, and declaring that they're just not interested in taking on Facebook and the Quest 2 at all. They're walking away from this, essentially.
Yeah, they can't really. They're smart to kind of go the opposite direction and service the other end of the market, because the enterprise end of the market is actually huge. It's huge. When you think about how university, the education, the medical, all the professions, it's not at all a small space. It's let alone the government, the policing and military use cases. It's absolutely tremendously huge. And Facebook is not really aiming for that either. So it's smart for HTC to go into that, because they can focus much more on not having the problems that often Facebook is associated with, like we talked about with WhatsApp around the privacy issues and the data sharing issues and the ad network components and yada, yada, yada. And we've been diving into those conversations in recent rooms where how and why, due to eye tracking, all of the amazing amounts of data that can be gathered from these devices through the eye trackers, which is Toby, which our friend Frederick worked at for many years, and my friend John was the CEO and co-founder of. But they're able to detect, 10 times more about the user than your smartphone can in amazing ways, even if you've been using drugs and what's going on. If you're anxious and if you have extroversion or neuroticism, if you're depressed, have autism, if you have eating disorders, all these things are discernible. If you've used ecstasy or alcohol or tobacco or cannabis, these eye trackers can detect all this in the VR space, and how that could be used as part of an ad network is truly kind of mind-blowing. But
well, one thing I didn't mention is I did mention the foveated rendering, and so did Victoria. But that for those who don't know, that is enabled through having eye tracking. Correct. And then, of course, we have the whole discussion of the biometric data and the mental health and everything else. So, how much of this are they going to put in the hands of the enterprise institutions? Right. I wonder, are you going to be able to not only assess performance of somebody who's learning or one of your members of staff who are doing training, but are you also going to be able to, get other data from that about mental health and state and that kind of thing? And especially in sort of high intensity roles like firefighters or police, I can see that kind of data actually being able to see on a core level how a person is reacting in a VR situation. That's going to be really, really, really valuable.
Yeah. Final thoughts on the VR point?
So, I'd like to ask Carl a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Carl, I would love
Tyler,
to know.
did you want me to jump in at all?
Hold that thought, Nicholas. I'm trying to see who's asking the question, but
I'm sorry. This is Luis. I apologize.
Go ahead, Luis. Yeah, no, go ahead, and
Great,
then
thank you.
Yeah.
So, Carl or Ben or somebody may know, maybe Victoria. There was a headset that blew me away. It was kind of quietly introduced to me at an NAB several years ago by somebody I used to work under named Ted Shilowitz, who helped build Red, the digital cinema camera. These VR headsets, were really like Oakley sunglasses, very high resolution, very, very effective. It almost had a military feel to it, very small, very impressive, very expensive also. It was a 3-letter word company. I totally forgot what it was. It reminds me of like OWC or something weird like that. Do any of you remember what it's called?
ODG. They went under. They don't exist
They
anymore.
went under, huh? Do we know why? Because I thought it was the most groundbreaking progress in the headset world.
All right. So I was gonna break down some of the context around this HTC thing, and I think this might be addressed by that too. Tyler, is it okay?
Yeah, go, Nicholas.
Okay, so in the XR field, there's basically 3 or 4 camps that are addressed by different market focuses from different vendors. And it's consumers, of course, there's enterprise, of course, and then there's the middle ground, which is the enthusiasts and developers. And they might also this middle group might also lean towards more consumer focused or more enterprise focused. And this is where I think HTC is making such a huge blunder in their communication strategy, because it's confusing. HTC has 2 main markets, the Western world and China. And in China, they are a consumer-facing company with, for example, the Vive Focus 3 and earlier headsets. And they are still pandering to a part of the Western consumer market, and they feel that they have to nudge that in, but it just confuses the message at this enterprise-focused launch of these 2 new devices. So, yeah, these are amazing headsets. The Vive Focus 3 is, despite having the same underlying processor as the Quest 2, the XR2, it's, the Quest 2 has a low price because of 3 reasons. So they do have the ad platform They of course make a lot of money now on app sales, software sales, but it's also a low cost because it has a lot of compromises in the build quality. And one of the things is they don't have enough cooling in the Quest 2, so they can make the XR2 processor run as fast as it potentially could. It's being overclocked in the Quest 2, whereas with the Vive Focus 3, they have put in a lot of active cooling and chosen materials and built a more premium quality product. And so it's needed, of course, because it's going to push 5K instead of almost 4K pixels. So it's an interesting product, and especially for enterprise. But at the same time, we see reception in the VR enthusiast crowd that they are pretty much wanting to buy the Focus 3 because it's a standalone wireless way to access PC VR. So yeah, they are not saying that it's a gamer headset, and that confuses the whole market, I think.
Thank you for that.
As for the ODG going under, there's a big graveyard of fallen AR projects, and ODG was a big supplier to the military, first of all, but I think that they were just leapfrogged by not Magic Leap, but Microsoft HoloLens. So everything until the HoloLens 2 has pretty much been a proof of concept in the way of what you can do with AR. And the HoloLens 2 is not at all as neat looking a product as the ODG AR glasses, but it can do the things that it needs to do with AR.
Thanks, Nicholas.
What would you say the key applications are for AR as it exists today?
Remote assistance, so being able to overlay instructions for whatever thing you're doing in the physical world. In the army and this